My name is Gloria. I am 28 years old and currently the sole provider for my stepfamily since my father passed away 3 years ago. Living in Boston with my stepmother Patricia and stepbrothers Aaron and Justin has been a constant struggle to belong. Despite my efforts, I have always felt like an outsider in what should be my own home. Nothing prepared me for that fateful dinner when Patricia looked me straight in the eyes and said those words that shattered my world, but ultimately gave me unexpected strength. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe to see how I turned the tables on my toxic family who never saw it coming. I grew up in a loving home in suburban Boston. My childhood memories are filled with weekend picnics at Boston Common, sailing on Charles River with my dad, and baking cookies with my mom during cold New England winters. Our modest colonial house on Maple Street was always warm and filled with laughter. My parents, Stephen and Margaret Williams, were college sweethearts who built a beautiful life together. Dad worked as an investment banker while Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. My world changed forever when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 11. The following year was a blur of hospital visits, whispered conversations, and trying to be strong. I would sit beside her bed reading her favorite Jane Austen novels as she grew weaker. On a cold January morning when I was 12, she slipped away while holding my hand. Dad and I were devastated, clinging to each other through our grief. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me. We developed new routines and traditions like Sunday movie nights with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. Though we were still healing, we found a new normal. Dad worked hard to be both parents, attending my school events and helping with homework despite his demanding job. Everything changed when Dad met Patricia Montgomery at a charity fundraiser. She was striking with her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and designer clothes. Patricia worked in real estate and had 2 sons from her previous marriage. At first I was wary, but hopeful that Dad might find happiness again. When Patricia first entered our lives, she made a significant effort to connect with me. She would bring me small gifts, ask about my interests, and seem genuinely interested in building a relationship. Looking back, I realized this kindness had an expiration date that coincided exactly with their wedding day. "Your father speaks so highly of you, Gloria," she would say, touching my shoulder affectionately. "I would never try to replace your mother, but I hope we can be friends." Dad was enchanted by Patricia, and within 8 months of meeting, they were married in an elegant ceremony at the Boston Harbor Hotel. I was the maid of honor, forcing a smile as I watched Patricia promise to love my father forever. Her sons, Aaron and Justin, stood sullenly beside their mother, barely acknowledging me during the entire celebration. After the honeymoon, Patricia and her sons moved into our family home. Aaron was 16, then 4 years older than me, and made it clear from the beginning that he considered me an annoyance. Justin was 12, the same age as me, but refused any attempt at friendship. "This is our house now, too," Aaron informed me while helping move their belongings in, "so you better get used to it." The dynamics in our house shifted immediately. Patricia redecorated, removing most traces of my mother. One day I came home from school to find Mom's antique reading chair gone, replaced by a modern leather recliner. "That old thing, I donated it," Patricia said dismissively when I asked. "It didn't match the new aesthetic." I found the chair later hidden away in the basement and would sneak down sometimes just to sit in it, trying to recall the scent of my mother's perfume. As I entered high school, I threw myself into academics as an escape from the increasingly uncomfortable home environment. Patricia showed preference for her sons in every situation, from meal choices to vacation plans. Dad seemed oblivious, working longer hours and traveling more frequently. "Your father works so hard to maintain our lifestyle," Patricia would say whenever I expressed disappointment at his absence. "We should be grateful, not demanding." I graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to Boston University to study finance, following in my father's footsteps. I lived in the dorms but visited home regularly, mainly to see Dad. During those college years, I noticed Patricia becoming increasingly controlling of family finances, though Dad still made the major decisions. After college, I secured a position at a prestigious financial firm in downtown Boston. My starting salary was impressive, and I was on a fast track for advancement. Dad beamed with pride at my graduation dinner. "Just like her old man." he said, squeezing my shoulder affectionately, but smarter and more determined. I noticed Patricia exchange a look with Aaron across the table, but thought nothing of it at the time. 3 years into my career, disaster struck. Dad collapsed at work from a massive heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. He was only 55. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences. I felt orphaned all over again, but now surrounded by family members who felt like strangers. In the days that followed, I discovered several surprising facts about our financial situation. Dad had some investments and life insurance, but not as much as I expected. More shocking was learning that Patricia had convinced him to change his will shortly before his death. "Your father wanted to make sure I was taken care of," Patricia explained when I questioned the changes. "He knew you were doing well on your own." The family home that should have passed directly to me as his only biological child was now Patricia's property. The life insurance barely covered outstanding debts. Within weeks of Dad's passing, Patricia approached me with concern about household expenses. "Stephen always handled everything," she said, dabbing at dry eyes. "I am simply not prepared for this responsibility." Out of loyalty to Dad and a desperate need to maintain some connection to my childhood home, I stepped in to help. What began as temporary assistance quickly became permanent financial responsibility. By the time I was 25, I was paying the mortgage, utilities, property taxes, and most household expenses. Despite my generosity, the emotional distance between us grew. Family gatherings became exercises in exclusion. Patricia, Aaron, and Justin would share inside jokes and reminisce about events I wasn't part of. My attempts to join conversations were often met with awkward pauses or subject changes. For my 26th birthday, I took the day off work, expecting at least acknowledgement from my stepfamily. I returned home that evening to an empty house and a hastily scribbled note. "Gone to dinner at Salvatore's, leftovers in fridge, Patricia." I later discovered through social media that they were celebrating Aaron's job promotion. My birthday had been completely forgotten despite the calendar reminder I had placed on the refrigerator door. I tried buying acceptance through increasingly generous gestures. I paid for a family vacation to Hawaii, purchased a new car for Patricia when her old one needed repairs, and funded Aaron's graduate school tuition. Each gift was accepted with perfunctory thanks, but no genuine warmth or inclusion. Last Christmas, I noticed I was missing from the family photo Patricia had printed for cards. When I pointed this out, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Oh, I assumed you wouldn't mind. It was just for immediate family." The statement stung more than she could know. After nearly 15 years together, I was still not considered immediate family. I began noticing hushed conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered rooms. Occasionally, I would catch fragments that made me increasingly suspicious. "She doesn't need to know about, as long as the bills get paid." Dad would have expected. Each incident alone seemed minor, but together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Still, I clung to the hope that I was overreacting, that somewhere beneath the coldness was a family connection worth preserving. I had been planning this dinner for weeks. After 5 years at my company, I had finally received the promotion to senior financial analyst I had been working toward. The salary increase was substantial, and I wanted to share my achievement with my family, hoping this might finally be the moment they would show genuine pride in me. I left work early that Thursday to prepare everything perfectly. I stopped at Whole Foods to purchase expensive steaks, fresh vegetables, and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from the vineyard Dad and I had visited during our trip to Napa Valley for my 21st birthday. I even made his favorite garlic mashed potatoes from Mom's handwritten recipe that I kept carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. The dining room table was set with the good china we only use for special occasions. I had polished the silver candlesticks that had belonged to my grandparents and arranged fresh flowers as a centerpiece. Everything looked perfect, just as Mom would have done it for a celebration. Patricia arrived home first, pausing in the doorway to the dining room with a surprised expression. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down her designer handbag. "I have some exciting news to share," I replied, trying to contain my enthusiasm. "I thought we could have a special dinner tonight." She glanced at her watch. "You should have mentioned it earlier. I told the boys to meet us here, but we were planning to go out to that new tapas place downtown." My heart sank, but I maintained my smile. I'm sure they won't mind changing plans once they tasted these steaks. They're prime ribeye. Patricia shrugged and went upstairs to change. Aaron and Justin arrived 20 minutes later, both looking annoyed when they learned we would be eating at home. I was looking forward to those bacon-wrapped dates, Justin complained, slouching into his chair. We can go tomorrow night, Patricia soothed, patting his arm. I served the food I had prepared so carefully, trying to ignore their lackluster response. As we ate, I waited for the right moment to share my news. So, I began during a lull in their conversation about a mutual friend I didn't know. I got some great news at work today. That's nice, dear, Patricia said, distractedly turning to Aaron. Did you confirm the beach house for next month? We need to lock it in before someone else books it. All set, Aaron replied. 4th of July weekend through the following week. Ocean views, private pool, the works. I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. Beach house. What beach house? We're renting a place in the Hamptons, Justin explained casually. It's going to be epic. The Hamptons, I repeated, setting down my fork. I haven't heard anything about this trip. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table as the three exchanged glances. Well, it's more of a family thing, Patricia said finally. I am family. I responded, the hurt evident in my voice despite my attempt to control it. Patricia dabbed her lips with her napkin, avoiding my eyes. You know what I mean, Gloria. Besides, you're always so busy with work. Not too busy to pay for it, I imagine, I said quietly. Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Justin suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. What exactly does that mean? Patricia asked, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of paying bills, funding vacations, I wasn't invited on buying gifts that received barely a thank you all while being treated as an outsider. It means that I'm good enough to fund this family, but not good enough to be part of it. I said, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside me. I pay the mortgage on this house. I pay the property taxes. I pay the utilities. I pay for groceries. I even paid for Aaron's graduate degree and Justin's car. No one asked you to do those things? Aaron interjected defensively. Really? I laughed without humor. No one asked. What about when the property tax bill came due 3 months after Dad died and Patricia said she didn't know how she would manage? Or when your car broke down, Justin and you needed a new one to get to your internship? Or when the roof leaked last year and needed immediate replacement? We've been grateful, Patricia said stiffly. Grateful. Is that what you call excluding me from family photos, forgetting my birthday, planning family vacations without me? I've been trying for years to be part of this family, and all I get in return is being treated like an ATM machine with legs. Patricia set down her wineglass with a sharp click against the table. Her eyes had gone cold, her mouth set in a thin line that I had seen directed at others, but never at me. Let me make something perfectly clear, Gloria, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Don't confuse paying bills with being part of us. We only keep you around out of pity. The room went silent. Justin's eyes widened at his mother's bluntness. Aaron had the decency to look uncomfortable, though I caught the slight smirk he tried to hide by taking a drink. The words hit me like a physical blow. All the air seemed to leave my lungs at once. In that moment, everything became crystalline clear. Every slight, every exclusion, every time I had felt like an outsider in my own home suddenly made perfect sense. They had never seen me as family. I was a convenience, a source of financial support, nothing more. I could feel tears threatening, but refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate, stood up from the table, and walked out of the dining room without another word. I grabbed my purse and keys from the hall table, slipped on my shoes, and left the house that had once been filled with love but now felt like a monument to my own self-deception. Behind me, I heard Patricia call out, "Gloria, don't be so dramatic." But I was already closing the door behind me, walking to my car with measured steps despite the earthquake happening inside me. I drove aimlessly through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the park where Dad had taught me to ride a bike, past my elementary school, past the ice cream shop where we would go for special treats. Eventually, I pulled over in the parking lot of a closed grocery store as the emotions I had been holding back crashed over me in waves. For the first time, I allowed myself to see the truth. They had been using me, exploiting my desire to belong and my financial generosity. Patricia's words echoed in my mind. "We only keep you around out of pity." But even that wasn't true. They kept me around for my money, for the comfortable lifestyle I provided them, while receiving nothing but contempt in return. As tears streamed down my face, something else began to emerge from beneath the hurt, a cold, clear anger, a determination. If Patricia, Aaron, and Justin saw me only as a financial resource, then it was time to reconsider our arrangement. They had made their position clear. Now I would make mine clear as well. I returned home after midnight, relieved to find the house dark and quiet. Instead of going to my bedroom, I went directly to the home office that had once been my father's domain. The family's financial documents were kept here, and I had full access as I managed all the accounts. Sitting at the desk where Dad once worked, I began methodically going through files, bank statements, and legal documents with new eyes. What I had previously seen as normal family financial management now revealed itself as something far more sinister. I discovered credit card statements for accounts opened in my name that I had never authorized. The cards had been used for luxury purchases, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, electronic gadgets. The statements came to the house but were intercepted before I could see them. The minimum payments were being made from one of my accounts that Patricia had access to. "This is identity theft," I whispered to myself, hands trembling as I organized the evidence. Digging deeper, I found documents relating to my father's will. I knew it had been changed before his death, but I hadn't seen the actual paperwork. The revised will left the house to Patricia with a provision that I would inherit only if she preceded me in death. The original will, which I found buried at the bottom of a filing cabinet, had left the house to me outright. Most shocking was a folder containing information about my father's life insurance policy. The beneficiary had been changed from me to Patricia just weeks before his death, when he was already experiencing symptoms that should have sent him to a doctor. The signature on the change form looked shaky, different from Dad's usual confident scrawl. As the night wore on, the evidence mounted. Bank transfers moving money from accounts Dad had set up for me into Patricia's personal accounts. Tax documents showing the house was remortgaged shortly after Dad's death with the equity withdrawn. Insurance claims for jewelry that was never actually stolen. I found old emails printed out between Patricia and a real estate colleague from before she met my father. They referenced targeting wealthy widowers and contained strategies for securing long-term financial stability. My father had been a mark from the beginning. The most painful discovery came near dawn. A letter from my father to me written shortly before his death, but never delivered. In it, he expressed concerns about Patricia's interest in our finances and his regret at changing the will. He promised to speak with his lawyer after returning from his business trip to revise everything again, the trip he never returned from. "My darling Gloria," the letter read, "I fear I may have made a terrible mistake. You are and always will be my only true family. Everything I have built was meant for you." The letter trailed off as if he had been interrupted while writing it. It was never finished, never signed, never delivered. But it told me everything I needed to know about his true intentions. Exhaustion and emotion overwhelmed me as sunlight began to filter through the blinds. I carefully returned everything to its place, keeping only copies of the most damning evidence. Then I went to my room and collapsed into a restless sleep. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career and reached out to my friend Samantha, who practiced family and estate law. We met at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood where I laid out everything I had discovered. "This is serious, Gloria," Samantha said, reviewing the documents. "What they've done goes beyond taking advantage of your generosity. The identity theft, the possible forgery on insurance documents, these are criminal offenses." "What are my options?" I asked. "You could pursue criminal charges, civil litigation, to recover assets, or both," she explained. "But first you need to protect yourself. They've had access to your financial information for years. There could be more you haven't discovered yet." I nodded, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos my life had become. What's my first step? Cut off the financial support immediately, secure your assets, find somewhere else to live. Then we can address the legal remedies. In that afternoon, I began implementing Samantha's advice. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution. I placed a freeze on my credit. I changed all my passwords and account access codes. I contacted the credit card companies about the fraudulent accounts. The emotional toll was immense. Sleepless nights became my new normal. Anxiety followed me everywhere. At work, I maintained a professional facade, but inside I was crumbling. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. During this time, I maintained a careful normalcy at home. I continued to pay bills while quietly making my plans. I endured family dinners where Patricia, Aaron, and Justin acted as if the confrontation had never happened, though there was a new wariness in their interactions with me. One evening, while everyone was out, I found myself drawn to the storage boxes in the attic that contained my mother's belongings. I hadn't looked through them in years, partly because it was painful, but also because Patricia had made the attic off-limits for reorganization. Now I understood why. Hidden behind holiday decorations and old luggage, I found boxes of my mother's jewelry that Patricia had claimed was donated to charity. Photo albums of my parents' early years together. Letters they had written to each other during their courtship. My mother's journals. All these precious memories had been hidden away rather than destroyed, perhaps as leverage or out of some twisted sentiment. I also found photos of Patricia with a man I didn't recognize dated just weeks before my father's death. They were standing close intimately. On the back of one photo was written, "Soon everything will change. Just be patient a little longer." I carefully packed these treasures into a secure location away from the house. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was about justice for my father and reclaiming the legacy my mother had left for me. I reached out to my father's old friends, people I had lost touch with after Patricia came into our lives. James Peterson had been Dad's best friend since college, but had mysteriously stopped visiting after the wedding. "Your father and I had a falling out," James explained when we met for lunch. "Or that's what Patricia told me when she called to say I wasn't welcome anymore." "Dad never mentioned any disagreement," I said, confused. James looked sad. "There wasn't one. I tried calling him multiple times, but Patricia always said he was busy or not interested in speaking with me. Eventually, I stopped trying. I always regretted not pushing harder, especially when I heard about his passing." James confirmed my suspicions about Patricia isolating my father from his support network. Other friends shared similar stories. One by one, Patricia had cut the connections that might have alerted my father to her true nature. With each piece of the puzzle that fell into place, my path forward became clearer. I wasn't just planning a departure, I was orchestrating a reckoning. Over the next few weeks, I focused on securing a new place to live. I found a one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge, close enough to work but far from my stepfamily. I paid 6 months' rent in advance and began moving essential items when no one was home. My financial advisor helped me create a complete separation of assets. We closed joint accounts, transferred automatic payments to new accounts, and documented everything meticulously. I consulted with an attorney about the identity theft and potential fraud, building a case that could be pursued if necessary. "You need to protect yourself first," my attorney advised. "Get yourself and your assets safely separated before confronting them. Document everything." And I created a detailed timeline and exit plan. First, secure personal documents like my birth certificate, passport, and social security card. Next, move irreplaceable items like photographs and family heirlooms. Then gradually transport clothes and personal belongings without raising suspicion. The logistics were challenging but manageable. The emotional aspects were far more difficult. Despite everything, this house had been my home for most of my life. Every corner held memories of my parents of happier times. Leaving felt like abandoning them somehow. One afternoon, while Patricia was at a spa appointment and the boys were out, I carefully removed family photos from their frames, scanning them before returning the empty frames to the wall. Patricia had long ago removed most visible photos that included me or my mother, but I knew where the originals were hidden. I found myself lingering in my father's closet, which Patricia had never fully emptied. His suits still hung there, his favorite ties neatly arranged. I took one tie, one that he wore to my high school graduation, and a bottle of his cologne. The familiar scent brought tears to my eyes. In my mother's hidden things, I found her favorite scarf and the pearls she wore on special occasions. These treasures went into my essential items box along with the family Bible and the handwritten recipes she had collected. I installed small security cameras in my bedroom and the office, accessible through my phone. Though it felt invasive, Samantha had warned me that once Patricia realized what was happening, she might attempt to destroy evidence or take my belongings. Creating financial independence was a complex process after years of entanglement. I had been paying the mortgage, property taxes, utilities, and most household expenses directly. Now I needed to extricate myself without immediately triggering suspicion. Working with my financial team, I created a transitional plan. Automatic payments would continue through the current month, but stop thereafter. Insurance policies with my name would be canceled after my departure. Credit cards Patricia and the boys had access to would be deactivated on the day I left. Throughout this process, I maintained a convincing facade at home. I continued making meals, participating in minimal conversation, and going through the motions of family life. If anyone noticed my increased absence or the gradual disappearance of my belongings, they didn't mention it. The final phase of preparation was the most difficult. I needed to say goodbye to the home itself. On my last weekend before the planned departure, I walked through each room when no one was home, allowing memories to surface. The kitchen where Mom taught me to bake cookies. The living room where Dad and I would watch old movies on Sunday nights. The backyard where we had barbecues in summer and built snowmen in winter. Each space held fragments of happiness that Patricia and her sons could never erase. I sat on the window seat in my bedroom, looking out at the maple tree that had been there my whole life. I had watched seasons change through this window, done homework at the desk in the corner, dreamed teenage dreams in this very spot. Leaving felt like abandoning a part of myself. Yet as I looked around, I realized how little of myself remained in this space. My photos were gone from the walls, replaced with images of Patricia's family. My books had been relegated to boxes in the closet to make room for decorative objects I never would have chosen. Even my bedspread had been replaced with something Patricia deemed more stylish. This wasn't really my home anymore. It hadn't been for years. I had been clinging to memories while living as a ghost in my own house. The night before my planned final departure, I sat in the dark in my father's study, looking through old family albums one last time. Photos of Mom and Dad on their wedding day, beaming with hope for the future. Pictures of the three of us at Disney World at the beach, celebrating birthdays and holidays. "I'm doing the right thing, aren't I?" I whispered to their smiling images. "You would understand, wouldn't you?" In the silence, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. They would want me to stand up for myself, to live a life filled with genuine love and respect, not to remain trapped in this toxic environment out of misplaced loyalty. I was ready to leave. The day I chose to make my final move was deliberately selected. Patricia was scheduled for her monthly hair appointment, which typically took 3 hours with her stylist in Back Bay. Aaron would be at his girlfriend's place, and Justin had a day trip planned with friends. It would give me ample time to collect my remaining belongings and leave without confrontation. I had arranged for a small moving truck to meet me at the house at 10 in the morning. My plan was simple: load the few remaining pieces of furniture that were rightfully mine, any last boxes of personal items, and be gone before anyone returned. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The movers were efficient, carefully loading my mother's reading chair, my desk, and several boxes of books and kitchen items that held sentimental value. I did one final walkthrough of my bedroom and the attic, ensuring I hadn't forgotten anything important. As I stood in the foyer preparing to leave for the last time, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Looking out the window, I felt my stomach drop. Patricia was home hours earlier than expected. I considered leaving immediately, avoiding the confrontation entirely, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps a part of me needed this final closure, needed to stand face to face with the woman who had caused so much pain. Patricia entered the house and stopped short when she saw the movers carrying out the last of my boxes. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp with surprise and anger. I am leaving, I replied simply, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Leaving without any discussion, without any consideration for this family. The irony of her statement was not lost on me. I think we said everything that needed to be said at dinner 3 weeks ago. Patricia's expression shifted, a calculating look replacing the initial shock. Gloria, darling, you know I didn't mean what I said. I was upset, that's all. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset. No, Patricia. For once you were being honest. You made it perfectly clear that I am not part of this family. I was just too blind to see it until now. As she took a step toward me, her hand outstretched in what was meant to be a conciliatory gesture. Let's talk about this rationally. Whatever issues we have, we can work them out. There's nothing to work out. I'm leaving. The movers will be done in a few minutes, and then you'll never have to pretend to tolerate me again. Her expression hardened. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. This house, the bills. And there it was. Her true concern revealed. My responsibilities. I laughed without humor. I have no legal obligation to support you or your sons. I've been doing it out of loyalty to my father, but I now understand that loyalty has been exploited. What are you talking about? Her voice had taken on a nervous edge. I know everything, Patricia. The credit cards opened in my name, the manipulation of my father's will, the life insurance policy that should have been mine, the remortgaging of this house to fund your lifestyle. Her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but you're mistaken. Your father wanted to take care of me, of all of us. Save it, I said, holding up my hand. I found Dad's letter, the one he wrote before he died expressing regret about changing his will and promising to fix it, the one you made sure I never received. Before Patricia could respond, the front door opened again. Aaron and Justin entered, stopping abruptly when they sensed the tension in the room. What's going on? Aaron asked, looking from his mother to me and then to the movers carrying out the last box. Gloria is having some kind of breakdown, Patricia said quickly. She's making wild accusations and threatening to abandon her family responsibilities. That's not what's happening, I replied calmly. I'm leaving because I've finally recognized that I was never considered family in this house. I was kept around as a financial resource, nothing more. Justin at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Aaron moved to stand beside his mother, presenting a united front. You can't just leave, Aaron said, his voice hard. Who's going to pay the mortgage? The property taxes are due next month. I almost laughed at his transparency. That's not my concern anymore. The financial support ends today. You selfish bitch, Aaron spat. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I repeated incredulously. What exactly have any of you done for me except take and take and take? Patricia stepped forward, her voice shifting to a pleading tone. Gloria, please, let's not do anything hasty. We're family despite our disagreements. Your father would be heartbroken to see us at odds like this. Don't you dare invoke my father, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You targeted him as a wealthy widower. You isolated him from his friends. You manipulated him into changing his will when he was vulnerable. You never loved him. That's a lie. Patricia gasped, though her eyes darted nervously to her son's. Is it? I pulled out my phone and played a recording I had made during the fateful dinner 3 weeks ago. Patricia's voice filled the foyer crystal clear. Don't confuse paying bills with being part of us. We only keep you around out of pity. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face cycled through shock, anger, and calculation as she realized she had been caught in her own words. That was taken out of context, she finally said weakly. There is no context that makes those words acceptable from someone who claims to be family, I replied. But it doesn't matter anymore. I'm done. I turned to the movers who were awkwardly waiting by the door. We're finished here. Thank you for your help. You can't just walk away, Aaron said, his voice rising. We'll contest the will claim Dad wasn't in his right mind when he set up those accounts for you. And I turned to face them one last time. You're welcome to try, but before you do, you should know that I have copies of every document showing the financial manipulation that's been happening since my father died. The credit cards opened fraudulently in my name, the forged signatures, the transfers from accounts that were meant to be mine. Their faces showed varying degrees of shock and alarm. They hadn't expected me to have discovered so much. I'm not interested in revenge, I continued. I just want to be free of this toxic situation. I won't pursue legal action if you leave me alone, but if you try to cause problems for me, I won't hesitate to use everything I've found. Patricia's face had gone pale. You wouldn't dare. You'd be hurting your father's memory. No, Patricia. The only ones who hurt my father's memory are the three of you by exploiting his daughter after his death. I picked up my purse and the small box containing the last of my treasured possessions. The utilities and other services will remain connected through the end of the month. After that, they're your responsibility. The information for all the accounts is in the office. I suggest you start making arrangements immediately. As I walked toward the door, Patricia made one last desperate attempt. Gloria, please. I'm sorry for what I said. We can work this out. We need you. I paused, looking back at her with sad clarity. No, Patricia, you don't need me. You need my money. There's a difference. And now you'll have to learn to live without both. I walked out the front door of my childhood home for the last time, ignoring the rising voices behind me. As I climbed into my car to follow the moving truck to my new apartment, I could hear the argument already beginning between Patricia, Aaron, and Justin, their unified front crumbling as they faced the reality of their situation. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel on my own terms. My first night in the new apartment was both liberating and terrifying. The space was smaller than my room in the family home, but it was mine alone. No one would enter without my permission. No one would make me feel unwelcome or unwanted. I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, eating takeout Chinese food directly from the container. The furniture the movers had brought was still covered in blankets for protection, except for my mother's reading chair, which I had immediately unwrapped and placed by the window. My phone had been buzzing continuously with messages from Patricia and her sons. I scrolled through them without opening them just to get a sense of their escalating panic. Patricia. Gloria, please call me. We need to talk about this rationally. Aaron. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. This is childish. Justin. Mom's really upset. Can you at least talk to her? As the evening progressed, the tone of the messages changed. Patricia. The mortgage payment is due next week. How do you expect us to manage? Aaron. This is elder abuse. Mom depends on you financially. Justin. The water heater just broke. Are you going to pay to fix it or leave us with cold showers? I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the floor beside me. Their problems were no longer my concern. For the first time in years, I was responsible only for myself. Sleep eluded me that first night. I kept expecting to hear footsteps in the hallway or voices from other rooms. The silence of living alone was both peaceful and unsettling. Eventually, I dozed off in my mother's chair, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of the cedar chest it had been stored in. The barrage of messages continued over the next few days. Calls came in constantly, which I sent directly to voicemail. Emails filled my inbox, ranging from pleas to threats. I created a special folder for them, preserving them as evidence, but not allowing them to intrude on my daily consciousness. A week after my departure, Aaron showed up at my workplace. I was in a meeting when the receptionist called to inform me. There's a man in the lobby claiming to be your brother, she said. He seems quite agitated. He is not my brother, I replied firmly. Please inform him that I'm unavailable and that if he doesn't leave, security will be called. I watched through the glass walls of the conference room as security escorted Aaron from the building. His face was red with anger, his gestures animated as he argued with the guards. The scene was embarrassing but also validating. For the first time, I was enforcing boundaries with my stepfamily. That evening, I received an alarming voicemail from Patricia. Gloria, I've been having chest pains all day. I think I might need to go to the emergency room, but I don't have health insurance anymore since you canceled the family plan. Please call me back. I'm scared. It was a manipulation tactic I recognized immediately. In the past, I would have rushed to help, only to discover the emergency was greatly exaggerated or entirely fabricated. I deleted the message without response. 2 days later, Justin called to inform me that Patricia was fine, no emergency room visit had been necessary. The implicit message was clear: I was meant to feel guilty for not responding to a false alarm. The harassment escalated until I had no choice but to seek legal protection. With Samantha's help, I filed for a restraining order against all 3 family members after documenting weeks of unwanted contact and Aaron's workplace incident. "This isn't what I wanted," I told Samantha as we left the courthouse. "I just wanted to be left alone to build my own life." "Sometimes people force our hand," she replied gently. "You gave them the opportunity to respect your boundaries. They chose not to take it." The restraining order provided temporary relief, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. Patricia spread stories among extended family members and mutual acquaintances, painting me as ungrateful, mentally unstable, and abandoning my family in their time of need. Most people saw through her attempts, especially those who had witnessed how I had been treated over the years. My father's sister, Aunt Celia, who had gradually been excluded from family gatherings after Patricia came into our lives, reached out to offer support. "I always knew something wasn't right," she told me over coffee at a downtown cafe. "The way she isolated Stephen, the way you seemed to fade into the background at family events. I tried to maintain contact, but it became increasingly difficult. And reconnecting with my father's family was an unexpected blessing amidst the turmoil. Cousins I had barely seen in years invited me to dinners and celebrations. Family photos were shared stories of my father's youth that I had never heard before. I found myself embraced by a family network I had almost forgotten existed. Meanwhile, the financial consequences of my departure hit my stepfamily hard. Through mutual connections, I learned that Patricia had been forced to take a full-time position at her real estate firm, rather than the part-time hours she had maintained while living off my support. Aaron had to move out of his luxury apartment and take on roommates. Justin's car was repossessed when payments weren't made. Most significantly, the house went into foreclosure. Patricia had never built up savings, spending lavishly on the assumption that my financial support would continue indefinitely. Without my income covering the mortgage and other expenses, they quickly fell behind. I felt a complex mixture of emotions as I drove past the house one day and saw the foreclosure notice. Sadness for the loss of my childhood home, guilt for the role I played in its loss, but also a sense of justice being served. The house had been meant to be my inheritance, something Patricia had manipulated away from me. Its loss seemed fitting if painful. Working with my attorney, I was able to recover some of the funds that had been fraudulently taken from me over the years. The credit card companies reversed charges on the unauthorized accounts. Insurance policies were corrected. It wasn't a complete financial recovery, but it was enough to give me a fresh start. The emotional recovery was far more challenging. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Morgan, to process the years of manipulation and emotional abuse. "What you're experiencing is complicated grief," she explained during one session. "You're mourning not just the loss of your current family situation, but the family you thought you had, the relationship with your stepmother you hoped was possible." "I feel guilty," I admitted, "like I should have tried harder or found a way to make it work." "From what you've described, you spent years trying to earn love and acceptance that was never going to be given," Dr. Morgan replied gently. "There comes a point where continuing to try becomes self-harm." Through therapy, I began to recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation that had defined my relationship with Patricia and her sons. I learned to identify my own tendency to seek validation through financial generosity, a pattern that had roots in my grief over losing my parents. "You can't buy love," Dr. Morgan reminded me, "and anyone whose affection is contingent on what you provide financially isn't offering love at all." It was a painful truth, but one I needed to internalize. As months passed, I gradually built a new life centered on my own well-being rather than others' expectations. I redecorated my apartment, creating a space that reflected my tastes and preferences. I joined a book club, made new friends, and reconnected with old ones who had been pushed aside during my years of family obligation. The legal matters eventually settled. Patricia and her sons avoided criminal charges by agreeing to a structured repayment plan for the funds they had fraudulently obtained. The house was sold at auction, generating just enough to cover the outstanding mortgage. They moved to a smaller place in a less prestigious neighborhood, their lifestyle permanently altered by the loss of my financial support. I maintained the restraining order even after the harassment subsided, a physical boundary to match the emotional one I had established. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about protection. Protection of my peace, my independence, my right to define family on my own terms. 6 months after leaving my stepfamily, my apartment truly felt like home. I had painted the walls a soft blue that reminded me of the ocean, hung artwork I had chosen myself, and arranged furniture to create a space that was both functional and comforting. My mother's reading chair still held the place of honor by the window, now accompanied by a small side table that held a stack of books and a teacup. The most significant change wasn't in my physical surroundings, but in the people who filled my life. I had formed what I came to think of as my chosen family friends who valued me for myself rather than what I could provide. Maria from the marketing department at work became a close friend after we discovered a shared love of hiking. We began exploring trails around New England on weekends, conversations flowing easily as we walked. "I never would have pegged you as the outdoorsy type," she commented during one hike in the White Mountains. "You always seemed so reserved at work." I was carrying a lot, I admitted. It didn't leave much room for anything else. My therapy sessions with Dr. Morgan continued evolving from crisis management to deeper healing. We worked through my grief over both parents, the betrayal by my stepfamily, and my fear of trusting others. "Trust isn't something you give all at once," she explained. "It's built, gradually tested in small ways before bigger ones." I put this philosophy into practice, allowing new relationships to develop naturally rather than forcing connections through financial generosity or excessive accommodation. Reconnecting with my father's side of the family brought unexpected joy. My cousin Sophia invited me to Sunday dinners with her husband and children. Aunt Celia shared family stories and photographs I had never seen before. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, took me sailing on the same lake where Dad had taught me as a child. "Stephen would be so proud of you," Uncle Robert said as we adjusted the sails. "Not just your professional success, but your courage in standing up for yourself." His words meant more than he could know. I had worried that my father would be disappointed in how things had ended with Patricia, that he would see it as a failure of the blended family he had hoped to create. Among my father's things that I had rescued before leaving was a journal he had kept during his last year. I had been reluctant to read it, afraid of what I might find. One rainy Saturday, I finally gathered the courage to open it. What I discovered brought both tears and healing. Dad had been aware of Patricia's true nature toward the end. He had noticed the isolation from friends, the excessive spending, the coldness toward me. Entries expressed his regret and plans to make changes after returning from his final business trip. "I have made a terrible mistake in judgment," he wrote in one entry. "Patricia is not the person I thought she was. Her treatment of Gloria has opened my eyes, though too late, I fear. I must make this right." Finding my mother's journal brought another kind of healing. Her words from 20 years earlier spoke directly to my current struggles. "Love should never diminish you," she had written. "True family lifts you up, makes you more yourself, not less." These discoveries helped me forgive myself for the breakdown of my stepfamily relationship. I hadn't failed my father. I had ultimately honored his true wishes by freeing myself from a toxic situation. My professional life flourished as the emotional burden lightened. The promotion I had wanted to celebrate on that fateful dinner night led to increased responsibilities and recognition. I was assigned to lead a team developing financial strategies for nonprofit organizations, work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. Determined to transform my negative experience into something positive, I started a support group for people dealing with financial abuse in family situations. The group met monthly in a community center downtown, creating a safe space for sharing experiences and resources. "You're not alone in this," I told a young woman who came to her first meeting in tears after discovering her brother had been stealing from their elderly parents. "And you're not crazy for feeling betrayed." The healing wasn't linear. There were still days when grief or anger would resurface unexpectedly. A familiar song on the radio, a scene in a movie depicting a happy family, the sight of a father walking with his daughter in the park, all could trigger a wave of sadness for what I had lost, what I had never really had. Dr. Morgan helped me develop strategies for these moments, ways to acknowledge the feelings without being overwhelmed by them. "Grief doesn't disappear," she explained. "It transforms. The goal isn't to forget, but to integrate these experiences into your life story without letting them define you." On the 1-year anniversary of my departure from the family home, I took myself to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. It was a celebration of survival, of rebuilding, of choosing myself. As I was leaving, I literally bumped into Justin coming through the door with friends. We both froze in awkward recognition. The restraining order had expired the previous month, and I hadn't renewed it since the harassment had stopped. "Gloria," he said, his voice uncertain. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, polite but distant. "I am well." He shuffled uncomfortably. "I've been wanting to apologize for everything. The way we treated you was wrong." And I studied his face, searching for the manipulation I had grown accustomed to. Instead, I saw something unfamiliar, genuine remorse. "What brought on this change of heart?" I asked cautiously. "Reality," he admitted with a rueful smile. "After you left, everything fell apart. Mom and Aaron still blame you, but I've had time to think. We took advantage of your generosity for years. I'm sorry." I nodded, accepting his apology without offering immediate forgiveness. "I appreciate you saying that, Justin." "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime?" he asked hesitantly. "Just to talk?" I considered his request. The old Gloria would have jumped at this opportunity to rebuild a relationship, any relationship, with her stepfamily. But I was no longer that person. "I'm not ready for that," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now." He nodded in understanding. "That's fair. Take care of yourself, Gloria." "You too, Justin." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure rather than regret. I had set a boundary based on my needs rather than others' expectations. It was a small moment, but a significant one in my journey. 2 months later, I met Ethan at a charity fundraiser for the Boston Public Library. He was a high school English teacher with a passion for literature and social justice. Our conversation flowed easily from books to education reform to our favorite spots in the city. When he asked me to dinner the following weekend, I accepted with both excitement and trepidation. Dating hadn't been a priority during my year of healing and rebuilding. On our third date, the topic of family inevitably arose. "I'm close with my parents and sister," Ethan shared. "They live in Worcester, about an hour away. What about you? Is your family nearby?" I took a deep breath and gave him the abbreviated version of my story. I watched his face, carefully expecting pity or discomfort. Instead, I saw compassion and understanding. "Family isn't always who we're born or raised with," he said. "Sometimes it's who we choose to let into our lives." It was exactly what I needed to hear. As our relationship developed, I was mindful of my tendency to try to buy affection. When Ethan admired a rare book edition in a store window, my immediate impulse was to purchase it for him. Instead, I noted his interest for a future birthday or holiday. I was learning that healthy relationships weren't transactional. Ethan appreciated my generosity, but made it clear he valued my company more than any material gifts. It was a new experience to be wanted simply for myself. Financial boundaries became a natural part of my new life. I created clear separations between my expenses and those I shared with others. When Sophia asked for help with her son's college application fees, I offered the money as a gift with no strings attached, rather than assuming ongoing responsibility. I established new traditions that honored my parents while creating space for future growth. On my mother's birthday, I visited her grave with flowers and spent the evening reading one of her favorite novels. On the anniversary of my father's death, I made his favorite meal and invited Ethan and close friends to share stories of their own fathers. The peace I had found wasn't about forgetting the past, but integrating it into a healthier present and future. My stepfamily had taught me painful but valuable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and the true meaning of family. One morning I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a check for a substantial amount and a brief note in Justin's handwriting, "My share of what we owe you, no strings attached." I deposited the money into an account I had designated for my future children's education fund. The gesture didn't erase the past, but it represented a small step toward making amends. The journey from that devastating dinner table moment to my current life was neither straight nor easy. There were setbacks and difficult days, moments when the hurt felt fresh and raw. But sitting in my mother's reading chair by the window of my own home, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, I knew I had found my way to something real and lasting. True family, I learned, isn't about shared DNA or legal documents. It isn't about financial support or obligation. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and the freedom to be fully yourself. Sometimes we find it in unexpected places with people who have no biological connection to us, but connect with our hearts and spirits. My story isn't unique. Many people struggle with toxic family dynamics and the difficult decision to walk away. If you're facing similar challenges, remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. What family relationships have you had to reconsider for your own well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps others find these stories of healing and transformation. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you provide.